All right, guys, welcome back to the Sex and Bacon podcast. On today's episode, I have this amazing guest with me, Tamara Schoon. She has her own podcast talking about sex and everything. Tamara, do you want to maybe kind of give us a little bit of background about your podcast, what it is that you do, and some of the conversations it is that you find you're having with women and men about, I guess, sex and all of that fun stuff?
Yeah, I started doing stand-up comedy like 4 years ago, and I started talking about sex and dating because I was newly single and I was dating a lot, and of course, sex comes with that sometimes. So yeah, I was just doing stand-up about it, and then I recently, like last year, started my podcast, and it's frank talk about sex and dating. So yeah, it's half interviews with experts like love coaches, sex experts, relationship coaches, and then half the episodes are just with real people just talking about sex and dating and different topics that come up. So yeah, and then I do provide books and resources. So I generally mention a book or a link to something or a TV show or something in each episode to further people's education. And
Nice.
but yeah, it's all about educating people and eliminating the double standard.
So prior to getting into
'Cause
doing,
women like sex too.
yes, yeah, of course, right? Prior to getting
Yeah.
into stand-up comedy, talking about sex, was talking about sex and being open about sex something that you were prior, or was this all just a shift after you became single and started getting into it?
Yeah, I was raised like talking about it. Like I got the birds and the bees talk when they used to call it that back in the day. I had the book and showed all the stuff, and it was never like an issue, or it was never something you didn't talk about in my family. So yeah, I've always been open, and like I was shy in the past, but if anyone started talking about sex, that'd be the one time I'd like jump in the conversation. Like they're like, "You don't say anything," and now you're jumping in. I was like, "Yeah, I don't." Somehow I've just always been able to enjoy talking about sex and open with it. I call myself Queen of TMI on my stand up. So I'm like, I have no filter, and I just say whatever's there, and I say what other people are thinking but are too afraid to say. So that's what a lot of it is.
Do you find that it shocks people? Like when all of a sudden so I mean, I guess in the way this is going to sound really bad, but I mean, growing up for myself, it was kind of like there was certain women or girls that looked a certain way. So when they talked about sex or were very sexual, it was almost like expected. And then you had women and girls that looked kind of proper, and you would never think for a second that they were sexual or that they had the same thoughts that maybe you did if, based off of you. So do you find that it shocks people coming from you, somebody who maybe, obviously, not to say, but it's like, I mean, you obviously don't look like a hoe and you're, whatever, and hooker and stuff. And not that, girls that look like that are the ones that are the only ones that are sexual, but that's almost the expectation is you don't look the part. So it's like, wow, can you actually be that sexual? Or it's not in our mind normal for somebody who doesn't look the part, the judgment that we assume. So
Yeah.
do you find that people are shocked to find that out from you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was at a podcast conference recently, and no one assumed this would be about what my podcast was about. There's one guy he called me an enigma, because I just seemed like I would not talk about that. And same with my stand up too, because I usually get dressed up for my stand up, and normally it's just kind of jeans and whatever. But I saw myself as the older, wiser woman imparting my knowledge, so I was dressing the part as. So yeah, they definitely are. And then I had a friend growing up who was all talk, all talk and no action. She joked that I was all action and no talk when it comes to this kind of stuff. So even though I
Nice.
just said I talk about it too, but yeah, they
Which is
definitely are
crazy that
surprised.
like that's the way that we judge people based off of like, oh, you look like you should be a sexual person, so it's okay. And then if you don't, it's like, but that is the norm, is like you said, is women enjoy sex too, right? Like
Yeah,
everybody out there, men and women, they're sexual creatures, sexual beings. So like you said, it's kind of normalizing the sex talk and normalizing sexuality and the different lifestyles of it. And, you know, we should all be able to have these conversations.
yeah.
So in your stand up, what's the most common thing that you find that you talk about that people enjoy hearing, and things that maybe they wouldn't know when it comes to sex?
Yeah, so the primary thing I talk about is the clitoris. I talk about it being a little known space to some, where if you touch it really well, we have orgasms. And it's not an elevator button where you touch it once and expect to enter. So yeah, that's kind of how the main theme of it is. Just, not everyone, no one, there are a lot of people that aren't great at sex. And that's where education and talking about it comes in. So, and the other thing I talk about quite often is oral sex. And once again, that people aren't as good as, I always assumed that women were really good at it. And I knew men, not always, because we're a little more complicated to figure out. But so it was surprising to learn that, both sexes think the other's not that great at it generally. So it's, we all need to be talking about it more and practicing more. And
That's
allowing
so true.
people to practice on you or like, just kind of exploring together and figuring that out.
Do you find that a hard conversation to have with, say, somebody you're dating? I mean, like you said, the clitoris is kind of this unknown thing that maybe not everybody's great at. I mean, I don't want to say using it, but they don't really know what they're doing with it. So do you find that's an awkward conversation to have with men that you're dating?
It can be for sure. And I have several episodes where we talk about how to talk about sex. So, you can definitely check out the podcast for that. And I joke in my stand-up too about that I was with a 40-year-old virgin at one point, and he like legit hadn't done anything. So I was just kind of letting him, I'm like, all right, touch right here and do this. And he actually caught on very quickly. So, I mean, it's easy to learn when you know yourself too. So, it totally worked. And I just told him how to do it. And so, yeah, I don't know. I've been with a few other younger men where I kind of do that too, and just say, like, I don't know, kind of teach them as we go. So,
Do you find that they're open to, I guess, the lesson, or do you think it's like do they take it as like a little bit of a hit to their ego?
from what I've found, I mean, and other men have said this, they want to know, they want to please you. So they'd rather you tell them, and of course it's how you say it or whatever. But if you're naked and just saying like, touch me here, then they are probably more inclined to like, be like, okay. So yeah, I mean it, and like I said, someone definitely mentioned before that I want to know, like, tell me what to do so I please you. So,
Yeah.
it just helps.
So with your own sexuality and stuff, do you, I guess in the very beginning of, say, of like a relationship, do you talk about how sexual are? Do you try to see if like you're a good fit or good match with another person's sexuality? Or is it kind of one of those things that no matter what, you're just willing to kind of have it evolve with them, and you're willing to have those conversations with them and hopefully have them be open to exploring different things? Or is there very set things where you're like, I like these kind of things, and it's like I need to date somebody who's willing to, be open to those as well? Or it's not really something like a person that you would go down the road of dating knowing that you guys have different sex drives or different things that you're into sexually?
Well, I'm on online dating, so, and I only have one app, but I tell them my love languages, which are physical touch and quality time, which pretty much equates to enjoying sex. It's like code for sex.
Mine too.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's pretty clear. And then when people have the same ones, it's pretty easy. And then because I have a podcast about this, I generally will mention, it depends on when I mention it, but once I mention that I have a podcast on sex, of course, it automatically people start talking to you more about it. So, guys want to get there as fast as we do, or at least talking about if there's compatibility. So you want someone obviously that likes it just as much as you do, and that's usually like comes out in the conversation at some point. And whether or not, if you meet and you're not attracted, then obviously you're not going to have sex with them. But if you get it out there, so when you do meet and you're hit it off, then already. Like I've only dated one guy that his testosterone was low, and I was always trying to have sex, and we did, but not as often as I would have wanted, and I was like very frustrated. And that's pretty much why we broke up, is he never wanted to have sex. And he got his testosterone levels checked recently and told me, he's like, man, I don't know how you did it. He's like, now that I have my testosterone, now I'm the one that wants to, and the girl he was seeing didn't want to or something. But he's like, I don't know how you put up with me for that long. So yeah, you definitely need to be in sync in that department.
Yeah. That makes a huge difference, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Part of your education, when you talk about education, is this kind of like tips on how to give a great blowjob, tips for women on, or I guess tips for men on how to go down on a woman for things to be enjoyable? Like, is this the kind of education that we're kind of talking about here on your podcast?
Yeah, definitely. We have one episode dedicated solely to oral sex, and it's a guy and I talking about giving and receiving, do's and don'ts, and what works and what doesn't, or at least for us.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and I gave some other
Yeah.
tips. So yeah, I definitely, like, men's biggest complaint is not enough like moisture, or
Yeah.
yeah, during it, and then it gets kind of dry and tugs at it, and then just um, like too much of like a death grip almost on it. With your,
Yeah.
because I do the hand mouth combo, which I think is really works, and then but some people do the hand like too hard or whatever. So yeah, it's like mimicking regular sex where you start from like kind of the middle up, and then the frenulum, which is the tip, the underneath of the tip closest to the body. That's the men's kind of like their really sensitive spot. So just kind of doing that combo where you hit that.
Okay.
And then, yeah, and then I have an episode just on female orgasms. And then we have an episode on squirting, because there's a lot of misconceptions about squirting. And then each one has books, or, Make Love Not Porn is a really good site for oral sex, like how we actually want it versus, how the regular porn is shown, because the clit doesn't get a lot of airtime because it's pretty small and you can't see it. So they don't focus
Mm-hmm.
on it on regular porn. So a lot of people get their sex education thinking that it's just slamming people, which is not a bad thing too, but ideally you're also hitting the clit
True.
at the same time.
It's funny. I don't think that I have ever, and I mean, like, I'm 41 years old, and I can honestly say there is not one time that I can actually recall that I actually got off from a guy going down on me.
Mm.
Ever. It's never happened. And I remember even at a young age, I used to say that to guys when they're like, guys used to always, I mean, here's the funny thing too. It's just like these guys were like 18, you're fresh in a bar, 20 years old. And these guys, trying to pick you up would always say like, oh, I'm the best at giving oral sex. Like, I'll give you the best orgasms. And I remember I used to argue with them and be like, you know what? No, you won't. And that's never happened. It's never going to happen. It's a waste of time. Like, no, thank you. And then even as I got older, it's like you have all these expectations. You think that these guys are going to be, great at it as you get older. And then it was just like still nothing. And I mean, literally, I'm 41 years old and I've never had a guy give me an orgasm from going down on
Wow.
me. So I guess if you were to tell me some dating tips or some tips even for myself or to pass on to them, what do you think it is the biggest thing that like they're missing here as to why this is not successful?
Yeah, well, part of it is the female mind. Like you have to say it or think you can have it, and then, but for the
Mm-hmm.
guys, it helps immensely to have fingers inside and your tongue on it. And like this guy was telling me, I've interviewed someone who's very good. Like I talked to lots of people about this, so he does like a come here motion with his fingers when it's inside while he's touching or
Mm-hmm.
licking. And then consistency is the big thing too. Like, and then there's the hood on the clitoris. So sometimes you have to actually like move the skin up to be able to get to the clit. And then it helps if you have a lot of foreplay first, because then you will actually be engorged and it'll be larger and everything will be ready to go. So when you do finally get the tongue down there, like I've come in like 5 seconds
Yeah.
from oral sex before, because I was already I was
Really?
so turned on already that as soon as he started touching me, I had one, because we were like making out and like totally just hitting it off. So
Yeah.
yeah, and I had my best orgasm through oral sex when I was 18, with the kind of like tantric orgasm lasted 60 seconds. And it was it was my boyfriend who, we were together a year, but he had to eventually just tie my hands down because I kept stopping him when it got really close. So he finally, when he
Yeah.
tied my hands, I was able to, well, I couldn't stop him. So I had the best orgasm ever. So now I know when you get to that point, try to let him go, try to keep going, but it's hard because
Yeah.
there's like this reaction to it. Like, I don't know. It's like almost like you can't stand it, but
I feel like that's a common thing in girls, right? Yeah,
yeah,
it's like we almost like resist it. It's like all of a sudden there's a weird feeling and you're like, whoa, that doesn't feel right. And then we're kind of like, okay, stop, go to penetration. Whereas maybe, yeah, if like you let the follow through
yeah,
go, it would be a little bit different. And I mean, I use vibrators and obviously I know that I'm capable of like getting off from clitoral
yeah,
stimulation. So maybe it's like, yes, okay, like it should, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe we just never found anybody right pressure, consistency, like you said,
yeah.
moving different parts back, the combination, but it seems like not a lot of guys really know what they're doing. Even with the girlfriends that I have that we've talked about, they're like, yeah, I had the one guy, only one guy that I've dated was like phenomenal at doing it. And it seems like that most seem to fall short in that like department.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's the
I don't
same for
know.
both sides. Like that's guys have said that too. There's only been
Mm-hmm.
a few girls that have been really good at it, and then most haven't been that great. But that's why the more we talk about it, the more we normalize it, the more we have these kinds of conversations. I was talking to someone on one of my last episodes, and he was after the fact he was like, "Yeah, I'm not very good at it," and I mean, knowing is half the battle, you know, like and being willing to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like I said, that site Make Love Not Porn definitely talked about how women would need it. And my oral sex episode is one of the more popular ones, but we like legit say all the things about it, giving and receiving. And
Hmm.
so, yeah. And
I'll have to check that
yeah, it's
out.
very much, you know, in our heads, unfortunately for us, not, or fortunately, you can talk yourself into it. And actually an episode coming out on the soon, I'll just say soon, is all about, he actually was able to talk a girl into having an orgasm. And I found that too. And an ex of mine will call, and for whatever reason, like when he'll like say things to me while I'm using my toys,
Mm-hmm.
and if he says stuff, I can have it like that much faster while I'm using my toy.
Okay.
So I don't know, something, you know, some people maybe find someone that, and it maybe it's a comfort. You know, we're together a long time ago, but yeah, and then this guy, the episode is really good. It's, you know, like I said, coming out in like 5 days, so it'll be awesome.
Nice. I'll have to check that one out. Look out for it. Yeah, I find that makes a difference if you have like that mental stimulation first. Like, I don't know. I feel like guys kind of struggle with that, right? Like, it's like you have to kind of almost build it up. You
Mm-hmm.
can't just all of a sudden out of the blue be like, oh, okay, we're going to have sex. Like, I feel like even now as I get older, it's like I need that mental stimulation, whether it's a flirty message you start with during the day or something, sexual that you just tell me you want to do to me later that you're imagining. Even if you're not actually thinking about it in that moment, you just send those messages because you're looking to create that buildup and you're looking to create that, like, I guess, like the buildup for later. And I mean, like, it's no different than girls. Like, I know guys are always like, oh, like girls are sexting and stuff. I am never actually thinking about sex or actually touching myself anytime I've ever texted a guy saying that I was. But I'm playing the part because it's like I want to build that up because I want them to be turned on and to feel good so that when you do see each other, it's like it's there already. You don't have to force it and like fight to get it. So it's like if you kind of give it back and forth throughout the day, I feel like it makes like the world of difference when you actually get to the point of having
Yeah,
sex.
for sure. And we talk about the love languages too. Like if they like to hear words, then you should say nice stuff earlier in the day, throughout the
Mm-hmm.
day, and then she'll be ready. And there's an episode about this couple. They like their kitchen really clean, so as long as if it's clean when he comes home, he's like all excited because there's nothing else to do or worry about. And then it's kind of like her foreplay to be like, all right, kitchen's ready. Like we don't have to, you know, we can start anytime kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. If it's acts of service.
Oh, so that's like an acts of
Yeah.
service type of love language
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. So, I mean, and
Yeah.
then I talk about this in my stand up too. If you touch a woman 10 times a day, non sexually, you know, especially if it touches her language, but if you non sexually,
Mm-hmm.
it makes women horny. Like it only took me 3 or 4 touches with this guy I finally was like, why am I so horny around you? And he said that his
Mm-hmm.
ex-wife's mom, well, at the time it was his wife's mom, said, you need to touch my daughter more often. And then he said it was like a thing where 10 times a day non-sexually. And I legit like 3-4 times, I was like, oh my God, I'm like so horny every time you touch me now. So yeah, it definitely can work too. And it's like the back. He touched my face in the elevator one time, and I didn't know at the time what he was doing, but I learned quickly. Yeah,
Yeah, it does make a difference,
yeah,
right? Like you have to build it up, unfortunately. I mean, don't get me wrong, when I was in my 20s, I was probably, you know, ready to go a lot
yeah,
quicker and a lot faster, but I feel like less pressure and less stress of life when you're
yeah,
younger. So it's not like you really have all this mental buildup and cloudiness going on up here. You're almost kind of at that point where you're probably just almost always thinking about sex and, when you're really young. And then it's all of a sudden as we get older, we don't realize how much stuff is going on that it's like we need that. We need those little touches. We need those little things. And so do
yeah,
guys, right? Like I'm very affectionate. I like to touch them as well. I want somebody to know that I'm into them. They turn me on, that, that I like them. But I do find some guys, they it's almost like sometimes when it's like you go and do those little things. I mean, even my ex-husband used to do that. If I go in and grab him and kind of like, give him like a hug or go to give him a kiss, it was like right away, it was like, oh, not right now. It's like they assume I'm
Mm.
trying to initiate sex all the time. And it's like, no, I just want, 2 minutes or 60 seconds of like affection, to add to it for like later because it's like, it feels good, right? But like, a lot of times people are like, oh, no, 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 like I can't right now. And they assume that it's the initiation of sex if you're giving them affection at
Yeah, and
all.
that's where the book Queen's Code comes in. How because women and men and women think so differently, and that's because a guy, if he's touching you, would probably that's probably what he means. So he assumes that's what you're doing back,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just because that's how men think that they assume. We both think the other people, the opposite sex, thinks like us, and it's not true at all. And reading that book was so enlightening. So yeah, Queen's Code is pretty clear about. And then there's all kinds of suggestions in there too, like pumpkin hours they call it. Like you actually have the discussion with your partner, like these are the hours I'm not going to want to have sex, like I'm going to be too tired or whatever it is, like like from when I get home to
I
this.
like
But yeah,
that.
and there's like all these different things, like conversation starters to figure out where you're both at, so you're both on in sync.
Yeah, I like that pumpkin hours it's called, hey?
Yeah. Mhm.
That's
And
cute.
yeah, because then like I don't mind being woken up, in the middle of the night if they're feeling it, but then some people are like, do not touch me, and then they'll get rejected, so they might not try it. So it's better to know, are you someone that's willing to be woken up or not, or definitely not, or just have those kinds of
Yeah, but
conversations.
don't you find though that it has to do with how they wake you up? Like, makes a huge difference. If I'm in a dead of sleep and like say your partner wakes up whatever 3 4 in the morning, they're a little horny, there's a huge difference of like rolling over, grabbing me aggressively and pulling me towards you, even if it's just you're pulling my ass into like you, and kind of like you come to me, do the little petting to see if it's like you can
Yeah.
wake them slowly, arouse them, like, so it's so hard to say because I mean, depending on who the person is and how they're doing it, I could say, don't ever fucking do that again. Or it's like, yeah, I really like that. And I don't think guys seem to realize it's like, you can't just roll over and expect and assume that because you wake up with a hard on that you can, grab us and we're good to go. Like,
Yeah.
we have to be turned on. You have to get wet. That takes time. I wish that I could just wake up and be instantly wet, or you touch me once and instantly wet. Unfortunately, that's just not the way that we work,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, at least most women. I joke about that in my stand up
Mm-hmm.
too, where I think I like it just happens to me more than the average person. But yeah, it definitely helps if they want to, if they like start touching you and you get turned on while you're laying there,
Mm-hmm.
and then you wake up from that, then yeah, obviously you're going to be more inclined to want to say yes. So good tip for the
Totally.
guys. Actually, don't just, try to ram it in
Yeah.
unless we just had sex and they're just like come in there and it's already wet. But yeah.
Okay, so not to be like gross or maybe TMI, that is probably one of my favorite things. It's like after a guy has like, finished inside me, and then it's like they take their fingers and they start playing around and they start fingering you. I fucking love that. I
Yeah.
love that sloppy, wet feeling afterwards. I don't know what it is, but I mean, maybe you like it too.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah, I
know.
do kind of, yeah. And it helps like if you're gonna have sex in the morning if there's still some left. It's like automatic lubrication. So yeah,
That's so funny. Hey, could you imagine? I mean, guys probably don't even think of this stuff, and it's like, to us, it makes a difference. Like these little things. I don't know. I
yeah,
kind of think about that sometimes, and I'm just like, maybe like, because I think of those things, and I'm like, does that make me dirty? Like, am I gross because I like that? But
yeah. Well, and that's
obviously we all do.
yeah. Well, and that's the part of it too is normalizing it. Because I have this
Mm-hmm.
podcast, so many people tell me things that they would never tell anyone else. And like guys with anal, like a lot of guys, like I had an episode with a female-led relationship person, and she's the boss in the bedroom and in life generally, but in the bedroom especially. And they talked about pegging, and then I've talked to a few guys that really, and the prostate, like they call it the P spot, which is pretty much like our G
Mm-hmm.
spot. So they definitely like have better orgasms and come faster, but a lot of them are scared because they think it makes them gay or sound, they sound gay or seem gay if they would let someone do that. But then I think the younger generation, they're all about it, and I'm probably going to do an episode on just all things anal sex at one point,
Yeah.
and then the male orgasm too, and talking about it. Because the guy
So
that did it, he's like, it's like 10 times better orgasm. He said when it's being penetrated.
how do you feel about that? Is that something you could do to a partner, or is that something like you're kind of not really sure of for yourself either?
Yeah, I'm definitely on the fence on that. I mean, if they would really like it and it would help, and I was like madly in love and we were a couple, then I probably would be willing to do it. But if it's just some random or like, you're not sure where it's going thing, then probably not. But yeah, I mean, knowing
Yeah.
that they enjoy it that much, like I'm a little more open to it. And then, like I said, if I have an episode, I'm probably going to have a repeat sex expert talk about the male orgasm and add that in there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
That's so interesting. I literally was having this conversation with somebody yesterday about pegging, and it actually shocked me when the person I was talking to said that they really like that. And I was like, what? I was like, really? And
Yeah.
like, most guys would never admit that
Mm-hmm.
because same thing. And don't get me wrong, I feel like men should be just as open with their sexuality
Yeah.
as women are and not have to feel any shame or anything into anything that they're into, right? But
Yeah.
I think as women being, a little old school or growing up not really, I guess, having that be normal, it's harder sometimes to see when you see these straight men that are into different things. And I mean, obviously we struggle so much to have, judgment and shame removed from us for our sexuality. And then sometimes it catches you off guard when you see men that are that open and can
Yeah.
express the things that they're into. And sometimes, yeah, I feel like even myself, I was like, oh, didn't expect that. But it's like, I still don't know how to process that in a man that can be that open and share that, right?
Yeah, and the guy that told me about it, like he didn't want me to use his name, of course, and he didn't want to be on the podcast, but I could share like what he
Mm-hmm.
shared. So yeah, it's the same thing, and it's hard to bring up, And then some people, like I had one guy who just really liked to think of his partner with other men. Like it was kind of like a shaming cuckold thing, where
Mm-hmm.
it turned him on, but it also shamed him. But it was like a turn on, so he wanted to hear, about people, like it was someone I was dating, like people I had slept with, or he wanted to know all the details. That like he like got turned on by hearing the details, and he was afraid to tell his prior partner, because he just assumed he'd be judged or whatever. And if that's where we
Mm-hmm.
come in again, we're having more of these podcasts where you actually just everyone has all kinds of stuff, and just admit it to your partner that you feel safe with and trust. And then who knows, maybe they liked it all along too, and you missed out for the last few years. Like just and then I interviewed a guy who his suggestion is to like show articles, or people could have this, show someone this episode and say like, oh, what do you think of that, or what do you think of this, and just kind of get a feel before they admit that they actually would want to try that, just to open the dialogue without basically saying that you're into it if you're kind of worried.
Oh, I love that. That's a great way. I never even thought of that before, of
Yeah.
like a way to kind of bring up that conversation with somebody without it just being awkward. It's like, oh, I came across this or I heard this from a friend. Like,
Yeah.
what do you think? Would you want to try that and stuff? That's a good one actually. I really like that. That's a
Yeah.
great way to bridge that gap.
Yeah, in case they're like, no
But
way, then you can be like, okay, yeah, I was just curious.
mm-hmm.
And then if they're like, damn, yeah, let's do it right now, you never know.
Right?
So, and just expect the unexpected and whatever happens. And but yeah,
Yeah. I feel like a fun thing to do too is like to, I guess if you've been seeing somebody for a little while or like, you're having like a longer term sexual relationship, is like go to say a sex store together, and it's like you pick out one thing that you want to try, something you've never done before.
yeah,
This is like we're doing something completely new. You pick out something you want to try, I'll pick out something I want to try. And then it's at least if you're both kind of like, hey, just so you know, we've never done this before. This is new. Step outside the comfort zone. Then you can kind of see where people go with it, what they pick, how extreme.
yeah.
And then you're like, oh, okay, right?
Yeah. And if one of you doesn't like it, you could be like, okay, let's not try that again. Or if you do, you get some more.
Yeah,
So yeah, definitely. And then,
yeah.
if you do it like a date thing, like once in a while, and pick out the new time to get our new ideas. So yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of a good way to do it, right? If you do like a monthly or every 3 months, you have to try something different, try something new that you've never done before. I mean, with boundaries, obviously,
Yeah.
some people have limits and it's not like no holds bar, let's do everything. But definitely a way to expand your, I guess, your sexual relationship with somebody that you're dating.
Yeah. And I was going to share, I was watching America's Got Talent, and they had a polyamorous couple on the show. Like the guy was a magician or comedian or something. And he mentioned my partners are in the audience. And the guy was like, partners? And so he's like, yeah, my wife and I have been married 15 years, and we met and fell in love with this girl 4 years ago, so we're all together. And I was like, that's the first time I've seen that on a mainstream like NBC TV show, at least in the U.S. So
Wow.
yeah, I was like, I mean, and that's cool, and that's what we're all trying to do is just there's all kinds of ways out there, and just do what works for you and your partner or partners or whoever.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. There's so many different lifestyles that people can kind of go get into and whatever works for them. But it is removing that, I guess, the shame and the guilt and all the fears around it. And I think that's the biggest thing is fear surrounding your sexuality and your interest in different things where talking about it and sharing about it. But like you said, I mean, there's so many great people out there and so many more conversations going on and podcasts going on about people talking about sex and normalizing it and, sharing their thoughts, their opinions, their experiences. And the more you see it, the more you hear about it. It's kind of one of those things where it's like then when somebody does bring it up, you're not as shocked by it and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I know what that is, and that's amazing. Like, I'm happy for you guys, and you see, happy people living these lives.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
It makes a big difference. So I have to ask, so since you are a comedian and you obviously talk about sex a lot and you do stand up with it and people know that you're, very open, what's the craziest thing that you've had somebody ask you to do or to try?
I wouldn't say it's crazy, but like I don't even. He wanted me like he said his balls were basically like numb from having ridden. I don't know, it was motorcycles or some kind of thing. Like they were like so numb. He wanted me to like squeeze them really hard, like the whole time. And I was like, oh my God. It was, yeah, that was hard to do just because it was like awkwardly like situated and like hard to reach. But I don't know. Nothing's too crazy or weird, I don't think. Like, I mean, I'm just open, so nothing seems crazy to me.
Yeah.
But that was just like a
Yeah,
difficult
that's
thing.
fair.
It was kind of like hard to do. So
He needed one of those little ball cages or
apparently,
something. I've
yeah.
seen those where it like,
Yeah.
a restraint on
I
them.
actually, yeah, I mentioned that later. I was like, they have to make something like that because there's no way I'm going to sit there and do that the whole time.
Oh yeah, that would be awkward
Yeah.
positioning
Yeah.
for sure. Like you'd have to be in a very specific sex position to be able to do that all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
he was one of, well, I've been with several guys that are pretty darn good at oral sex, luckily. So it's nice when they know what they're doing.
Oh, totally. So for yourself then, what's kind of obviously I normalize everything when it comes to sex and sexuality and stuff, but like what's the I guess the most out there kind of thing that it is that you're into that you like for somebody to do or that you want to try that you haven't tried yet?
Um, I'm pretty vanilla actually. So, the only thing I like to read, so Literotica is the website. There's all kinds of stories on there. So for whatever reason, I like the humiliation kind of stories. So that's like, and then
Okay.
I don't watch porn too much, but there are some out there like that too. But I don't know, because they always say men are visual, but women, when I read stuff, that's when it really turns me on. An ex-boyfriend and I would read stories together. Like I'd sit on his lap and we'd look at the computer and read, and then pretty soon we were stopped reading. But we always like just pick our favorite stories, and so yeah, it's not too out there. But I mean, I'm open. I generally let the man run the show. So if they're into something, then I'll do it, and if they're not, then I won't. So after interviewing people from my podcast, I know I should be taking charge a little more often. Not should, but I would probably enjoy it, and it gives you confidence in general. And that's what I learned from a few of the podcasts. But generally, I kind of prefer the man to take charge, and that's in the same with female-led relationship. If you have like, if you have a big job or whatever, or like a high up job, then you're more likely to want to be dominated. And then if if your day-to-day life is you're not in charge, then you want to be in charge in the bedroom. It's like a balance thing. So
Okay, I never thought of it like that before. But yeah, that makes
Yeah,
sense,
because he
right?
was saying the more high-powered people, the more high-powered they are, the more they want to be submissive in the bedroom. And it's just because they need that balance. They can't always be in charge everywhere.
Yeah.
And I know other strong women that are that way too. They just, guys assume and think they're intimidated by them because they're like, oh, they're so, have such high powered careers. But in reality, in the bedroom, that's when they want you to take charge. So just FYI, guys, if you do meet an independent woman, she probably wants you to take charge in the bedroom.
Oh, it's so hard though to find somebody who actually can and like you have that
Yeah.
trust because I'm a very take charge
Mm.
kind of person. I've always been a little bit more dominant, especially when it comes to like sex. However, I do find recent and like within the last like year or so, it's like I'm almost really craving like a man who can actually step in, knows what he's doing, can be the dominant person and but there's the
Yeah.
trust. Like you trust them knowing that they're not going to push you past your boundaries or they're not going to do something that's out of your comfort zone and like there's the respect there that like with the guidance it's like no means no or this isn't working, right? Like but that's
Yeah.
hard to find and I don't know if it's because I have such a strong personality. I tend to be more attracted to guys that maybe aren't as strong as mine. Like it's like that
Yeah.
balance. But then when it comes to the bedroom, I do find that it's like I'm always in charge, but it's like, yeah, I'm craving somebody to actually be able to take charge,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and that's what my last episode we talked about, the male energy and female energy. And if you like come home from
Mm-hmm.
work when you as a woman, if you still have the male energy, the guy has to you're either going to fight because you both have male energy or he has to revert to the more feminine energy to like, balance. So yeah, if you like and she actually gave a lot of tips about how to go back into your feminine energy, like taking baths and just like kind of switching your mindset when you get home so you can go flow more into the feminine energy and then the guy automatically kind of steps up because someone has to balance again. So if you're in the feminine energy then his masculine energy would probably step up more than likely.
That makes so much sense because as women, I mean, for some of us that it's like that do work full time and then same thing, you're running your home, you're taking care of the kids, you're always in that masculine go, 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 get things done. And I mean, that makes so much sense. I never even thought of it like that before.
Yeah, it's one of my longer episodes, but yeah, she gives lots of tips about that kind of stuff. And then I have an episode too on trauma because a lot of people have had trauma in their lives, and
Mm-hmm.
he goes qigong is like a method to like kind of rid yourself or heal yourself from trauma. And then the episode after that's going to be another guy that talks about the subconscious and sabotaging and different stuff and mindset. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, every episode is different and every episode has like something to offer someone. So it's like, but yeah, now that I'm plugging my,
It's crazy how we don't even think about how all of those things affect like our sex lives and like sexuality itself, right? But I mean, there's so many layers to it.
yeah,
Like it goes deep.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
But
everything's
yeah,
related to.
learning about it, I think is the coolest
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, I love to learn.
Sorry?
No, I was just, I can't remember what I said now, but just, that, yeah, love of learning for sure. I like learning and then you grow and do
Mm-hmm.
better when you know better. So,
No, it's so true. And realizing too that there's, like you said, there's so much more to it than just like the straight basics. Like you have the education, the tools, the understanding behind it, and all of those things together kind of really tie into, having that great sex life and having those uncomfortable conversations and stepping outside of that and finding somebody else who's willing to do that as well, right? But people don't realize how many tools are out there and how much education there actually is on these things, if you're stuck in an area.
yeah. And a lot of my episodes talk about communication too, and just, having the dialogue about these things and yeah. And yeah, educating yourself. There's plenty of resources, like you said, including my podcast. I know I've said it like 5 times, but
Yes, yeah. Yours goes live, sorry. You have new episodes that launch
yeah,
every
every
week, correct?
Tuesday, and it's called Straight from the Source's Mouth. Frank talk about sex and dating, and like I said, it's half experts, half real people. Although I had the expert say, "Well, I'm a real person too,"
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, she knew what I meant. And then yeah, books and resources and tips and links to stuff, and even just I mentioned a lot of Netflix shows too, because there's all kinds of educational stuff on there. The principles of pleasure is one, that actually shows the anatomy and goes into the different
Okay.
stuff. So yeah.
Oh, I would never think to go there for information. I always just assumed it's kind of other stuff, but I'll have to check
Yeah,
that
there's
out.
one called Sex Explained too about the female
Yeah.
orgasm. Like there's all kinds of stuff on there that
Mm-hmm.
helps.
The big myth of the female orgasm,
Yeah.
hey? Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely something I think within the last 2 years, because I mean, being somebody who never really got off, I guess, from a guy, from going down on me and stuff, it was always kind of like internal. I mean, like that's a lot more challenging for a girl to actually have like a G-spot orgasm. And it's, if you don't really know your own body and don't really know yourself, it's kind of hard to actually achieve that. And I think that was something probably within the last 2 years, 2.5 years that I really discovered. And then all of a sudden it's like in my mind, I'm like, how did I go my whole life having sex and like not actually having these orgasms? And then I'm thinking, was I ever actually really ever even having orgasms? Sex, don't get me wrong, sex
Yeah.
feels great, even if you don't have like a G spot orgasm or you don't have like, clitoral one. I mean, it still feels
Mm-hmm.
good and it's the connection, but I'm just like, I think I was really missing out, but I don't even think I knew my own body well enough to really, fully know what was going on. And if you're not, say, with a lot of long term partners, you're probably not exploring as much. When you have a lot more shorter partners, a higher turnover, a lot more casual sex, you're really not having those conversations. You're not
Yeah.
learning anything.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I have a whole episode on the G spot and squirting and all that stuff. And once again, she was the person
Mm-hmm.
who was doing that episode. She said it's all in your mind again because women are so worried about other stuff. And she tells the story how her best friend and her husband, like she hadn't had one of those kinds of orgasms. So she had the husband like sit back and she showed him how to do it. And she got her friend relaxed and then she showed her like how to do it, and then now she can repeat them all the time. But she's like, yeah, let me show him. And
Okay.
they had a history
Yep.
together of kind of playing together too, so it wasn't like out of the ordinary for them. But she felt bad that she couldn't have that kind of
Right.
orgasm. So, and then the guy I interviewed for the one that mentioned you showing articles to people as an idea to see if they're into something, he also said that once you have a clitoral orgasm, it's easier to have the G spot kind, and they really, like they
Okay.
kind of go hand in hand, but one makes the other one easier. And then
So kind of like while you're having sex, have like your clitoral orgasm first in that, and
yeah,
then
he was saying it
okay.
helps the other, and it's basically the G spot is kind of like the other part of the clit. The clit's like huge, and but it's mostly internal,
Mm-hmm.
and it runs along like I don't know, I forget how my last episode she talked about all the specifics of it, but yeah, it's kind of like the tip of the clitoris, almost like the tail, I think they call it, of the clitoris is kind of like the G spot where it kind of comes out. So it's almost like the clit really, but yeah, so it.
Hmm. That's interesting. I'll have to start bringing out a vibrator more than when I'm actually
Yeah,
having
that's
sex.
the way I do it. I always have, not always. I generally have, and then if I don't, I wish I had my toy. So if they're doing everything else, I just
Mm-hmm.
use it on my clit, and I can have an orgasm every time for sure. So yeah.
Hmm. I feel like sometimes like I always worried that like a guy would be offended if I brought out like a vibrator while you're having sex. Like they're thinking like, oh, she needs her toy. Like I'm not doing
I
something
think some of
right.
them actually like it because they know it's harder for them to do it anyways, or it's like a weird angle. So yeah, I've
Mm-hmm.
generally used it. I'm not gonna, especially I don't know. There's been some guys where I'm like, I am gonna have an orgasm too. So this, like this is happening. And there's a book,
Yeah.
"Girl Wash Your Face," where her and her husband said had made that pact too. She's like, anytime you have one, I have one. Like it's a given. And I've had boyfriends like that too, where it's like, you're gonna have one too. So like whatever we need to do, and that's always appreciated, of course.
Yeah, that's fair actually. And I should be looking at it more like that. Like it's not just for
Yeah.
you. So, fuck, I dated this one guy that I remember like I hated the sex. I don't know why I stayed with him for as long as I did, but I hated the sex. It was never enjoyable. I never had orgasms. And then it's like as soon as we'd finish, he'd kind of always get up to go do something. I'd run to the fucking bathroom with my vibrator and quickly like give myself an orgasm just because I was like,
Yep.
okay, it's like I'm on the brink of like I need
Mm-hmm.
something, but it's like you're not going to do it never ever. So it's like I always had to go finish myself off, where it's like I shouldn't have had to like hide that. I shouldn't have had to go to the bathroom to do that. Should have been able to do
Yeah.
that together or something, but it's such an awkward conversation
Yeah, I did have one
sometimes.
boyfriend where, like, if he did first, and I would be like, all right, like, keep touching me or keep going, you know? And so, but yeah, because we were together a
Mm,
little longer, it was easier to say that. But yeah, I mean, and that's like the whole point of these podcasts is to educate people to ask for like, what they want. And just if enough people have these conversations, they can say, like,
mm-hmm.
I didn't get mine, you know, like, keep going, or let's start over. Or next time it's me or something first, you know, just kind of
Yeah.
negotiate, you know, so you both enjoy it. And then it makes the man, they like to provide. That's what Queen's Code talks about. They like to provide and they like to help us. So if you say that's what you need and want, they will
Yeah.
be happy to do it. And if you tell them how to do it, then it's even better. Because if you say you want a man to provide for you, but then you don't give them the tools to do it, then you're just setting them up for failure. So, like, I really want you to do this, and then they will be happy to provide if you can explain
Mm-hmm.
exactly what would make it work for them too, for you too.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's so true, right? It's, I guess it's like getting out of our own heads and thinking about it from like the other side too, instead of like feeling like, ugh, I can't admit to you. I mean, usually our go-to is just to fake an orgasm, so
Yeah.
get it over with. Not because like you don't like them, and but you're like, oh, it's, I know it's not going to happen, and this is going on, so sure, I'll just fake it for you, get it over with, get it done, and then worry about myself
Yeah.
later.
And I've never been one to fake it because I just, if it doesn't happen, like, I'm just be like, yeah, it's not working. And it may not.
Mm-hmm.
In my last episode too, she talks about that. She's like, how to tell if a woman's faking it, because usually she talked about this like amnesia we get where we're all super lovey-dovey and like extra nice and sweet after an orgasm. So she's like,
Mm-hmm.
she tells the guys, like, if they're not like that, then you know that she didn't really have one. So I
Ah,
know,
don't give away
yeah,
our secrets.
that's one good thing about these two is like we talk about it too
Right?
much, like everyone knows everyone's deal. But yeah, I mean, it is it.
Right? It's just like I can't
Yeah,
tell you.
definitely when it needs to get over, you're like, all right, like, let's just be done. Or I'll even
Mm-hmm.
say, like, are you almost done? Like, like, are you close? So they kind of get the hint that,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's too funny. Yeah, we all seem to find like those little tricks that seem to work for us. It's like while you're doing it, of like, okay, how can I speed this up or like slow it down? But usually it's like the speed
yeah,
it up and like,
yeah.
you know, get it over and done with, which
Well,
is
yeah,
so
and then some
bad.
guys think that's what you want to like go forever. It's like, yeah, I'd rather have quality over quantity.
Mm-hmm.
If we can, you know, have our orgasms within 5 minutes, then that I would totally down with that. You know, sometimes sure longer sessions are great, but
Totally.
you know, quick is quick is good too.
That's too funny. Yeah, I guess I mean, it's a little bit of everything, I guess, right? Sometimes you need a
Yeah,
quick one just to get over with. Sometimes it's like, yeah, you got time for like the longer sessions, but that's too funny.
yeah, or
Yeah.
multiple in a day.
Right? I could go for
Yeah,
that too, multiple at a time, right? The
yeah,
preparedness of like a longer session and, making a night of it. But definitely those little bathroom quickies here and there too. Like, I'm all game for those too.
yeah,
But
yeah.
all
Especially
right,
when you're feeling it and it's easy.
right? Yeah, like I think that's the thing is like for me it's always so hit and miss as to when it's like I'm into it. You could be out for dinner, having like a drink or something, and guy smells kind of nice, or you're with your partner and they touch you, and then it's like all of a sudden, okay, like we need to go right now, whether it's to the car, to the bathroom, something. Let's go and have like a really quick little, session just to like
Yeah.
feel that when you feel those like horny tingles, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. So is that something you would do too? A little bit of public sex, a little bit of, you're out, get a little bit like risky.
Yeah, I do kind of like the idea of like being caught or watched or found or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. So yeah, I've done a little bit of that. I've even done the like when I was younger, driving in the car while doing it several times. So like sitting on the lap
Oh
and then one
God,
time
I've
I
never
was
done that.
yeah, yeah. And then one time I was well, I've had it both ways where I was driving and getting oral sex and then I was
Mm-hmm.
giving oral sex to my partner at the time. And then I like got up and like this busload of people. I was like, oops. So yeah, been there,
That's
done
funny. Yeah, it's always the excitement of like getting caught, right? I think girls
that.
like that a little bit more than guys probably. I've had more guys kind of turn down the whole public, like, no, 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 they don't want to be like, and then girls are like, no, no, let's do this.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if they're worried about, yeah, being seen or getting arrested or whichever. Maybe
A
they're
little bit
more
of
inclined to get arrested.
reputation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Right. But that's funny. Okay, so what is a little parting gift here for all of our listeners? Say, what would be your number one sex tip if you had to give one that you think would be the most beneficial to everybody to, for a better sex life or to have those conversations?
Well, I mentioned it a little bit, but like for oral sex and like giving a guy oral sex, if you use your hand and your mouth, like your hand next to your mouth while you're
Mm-hmm.
going down, you don't have to go down as far, so you don't have to gag or do anything, but you get it wet enough, either through your own spit or whatever, and you slide your hand just as much as, your mouth. So you, like I said, and hit that frenulum, that spot at the tip, like right at the base of the tip.
Mm-hmm.
And that combo of your hand and mouth together, I can do it. It works quickly. I'll just say that. So yeah, and you have to just make sure you have enough spit though, and don't grab it too hard. Like you want a loose grip, and
Mm-hmm.
then do the combo of the hand and mouth together, and you will please your partner quickly and easily in the future.
Nice. I love that. I feel like that's usually one of the biggest challenges is like giving guys a blowjob to like completion, right? I mean, like it's a lot harder than like what I guess like we think sometimes, and everybody's so different, but yeah, like makes a huge
Yeah.
difference, right?
Yeah, and I like to watch. Like, I'll ask them to touch themselves so I can see how they do it. Because
Mm-hmm.
then it's if you've ever seen a guy do it, it's way it's not what you think it is. It's pretty much the tip a little bit and like really loose, and you would not have guessed that. Like, I don't know. I think most people think you do up the whole thing, but yeah. So from the middle up, and just a lot looser than a lot of women think you're supposed to grab it. Even with your mouth, probably is not so tight, and then no teeth, of course. If you can feel the teeth, you should probably try not to do that too
Ugh.
often.
I think that's like a big mistake we all make when we're younger is like accidentally a little bit too much of
Yeah,
that, right? You're like, ugh.
yeah, and then
Yeah,
yeah for
especially when you
guy,
can feel that it happened.
yeah, and then for guys, just more. The more places you touch, the more holes you enter is better, especially during oral sex. So yeah, the more
So true. Slow
stimulation.
it down. Take your time,
Yeah,
right?
and
Don't rush it. Don't
foreplay.
expect too much.
Yeah, and foreplay ahead of time gets everything engorged. When everything becomes a lot bigger and blood filled when you're turned on, and then you can orgasm that much. It's like 10 times easier when it's already engorged and ready. Like I said, that 1 5 second orgasm. So
Yeah, I think we could all use a few of those, right? Quick,
yeah,
fast, 5-second orgasms,
yeah,
multiple, over and over.
yes,
Yeah, I'm gonna have to put some of those tips to use and guidance. I'm gonna have to give partners more guidance on some of those things, and hopefully, in the near
yeah,
future, I can have an orgasm from a guy going down with me. That'll be my goal, my bucket list goal to try to achieve before the end of the year. I'll have to let you know how that goes.
yeah, definitely. And yeah, in the mine, I said when I was 18, I had that best one. So I've told
Mm-hmm.
guys after that, and they're like, oh, then they wanted the challenge of repeating it for me. And then I finally just stopped having to tell people. I'm like, all right, never mind. Like, it's probably not going to work. So, but part of it is the mindset of saying it's not going to work. If you say it's not going to work, it doesn't work. So you have to
Yeah.
just like know it can work.
No, that's true, right? I guess it's like, I mean, if I've been thinking that for over 20 years, it's probably part of the battle too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Just
that's
know you
awesome,
can.
right? I can, and I will.
Yes.
I'll have
By
to
the end
make
of the
that
year.
like my little thing, right? I can, and I will.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good one.
that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing, your experiences and some of the stuff that you talk about, and especially the education and the tools. I think that's a huge thing is we don't even realize what's out there for us to kind of to read, to watch, to listen to have those conversations that people, are starting to have more of now than what they ever were before. So I appreciate that
Yeah.
you're able to share that with us as well and for everybody listening.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, and it was awesome to be on. And yeah, I love educating and helping people and talking about this stuff. So glad you do the same.
Yes, trying, right? Getting it all out there from
Yeah,
multiple people in different ways, different perspectives, different experiences. I feel like, if enough of us are doing it, eventually it'll become normalized. And,
yeah,
you know, yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you. And Definitely for everybody listening, we'll drop the links, share some of the tools and everything that Tamara was talking about so that you guys can all look into it for yourselves as well and start to have those conversations and learn a little bit more about what you need to for your sex lives as well. Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.